everyone, this is Heather. Thanks so much for joining me. Today we're going to be making this fun ship's porthole card using some brand new products from Stampin' Up. I wanted it to look like that you were looking out from inside of a ship with some portholes and the fun little animals swimming by. I'm going to be using the Whale Done stamp set. It's really cute. It's got lots of cute underwater critters and some fun sentiments. I'm also going to be using the wood plank embossing folder and some of the Whale of a Time pattern papers. These are 6x6 pattern papers with really great designs in them. I'll kind of flip through. There's whales and jellyfish, seahorses, turtles, lots of backgrounds, mix of all the animals, and they are double-sided, so you get some more kind of traditional patterns on the back of a lot of these. For my slimline card base, I'm going to be using a piece of green cardstock. I've cut this to 9x8 and I have scored along the 8 side. I've got a piece of tan cardstock that's 8 3/4 by 3 3/4, some 110-pound weight white cardstock for stamping, some dark brown cardstock for die cutting the portholes, a small piece of green for the sentiment, and 1.5 pieces of one of the pattern papers. This has like the sandy ocean bottom and some seaweed and greenery coming up. I wanted the wood texture to be continuous so that it looked like planks on a boat, and I needed it to be longer than the embossing folder, which is a 6x6. So I'm going to emboss and then slip it over and emboss again. So I'm going to place my cardstock in my folder and shut it, and I'm going to run it through in this direction so that this piece is able to go straight through the die cutting machine. And I am using a Sizzix Big Shot, which is wide enough to accommodate these 6x6 embossing folders. So here's what it looks like after I've run it through once. I'm going to turn it and kind of line up the edges where the other embossing ended with the edge of the folder. It doesn't have to be perfect. If there's a little bit of a gap there, it's just supposed to look like wood planking, so it's not going to be a big deal. Now I'm going to close it and again run it this way through my die cutting machine. And now I have a continuous pattern on this long piece of cardstock. Now I'm ready to start die cutting out my portholes. So I'm taking my ruler and I want to find the center of my paper and make a little pencil mark. For the openings and the portholes, I'm using some stitched circle dies from Stampin' Up. I'm going to take the smallest of the dies and using that pencil mark as a guide, I'm just going to kind of eyeball the center of my cardstock. If you're not comfortable with eyeballing it top and bottom, you could continue to get out your ruler and make sure that everything's spaced out. I'm going to take a piece of washi tape and tape that in place and run that through my die cutting machine. I'm going to carefully remove this and save that circle for another project. And then I'm going to move it over, and between that center circle and the edge of the cardstock, again, I want to center that in. I'm going to die cut that out. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the left side. And here's my last circle die cut, and I'm going to be cutting my portholes. So I've got the same circle that we just used and the next size up stitch circle die. I'm going to lay my washi tape over top to make sure that those are evenly spaced. I'm going to tape them to my brown cardstock and cut this out 3 times. And so as you'll see, when I remove this, I end up with a circle and an opening that has that nice faux stitching around the edges. I've turned my brown circles over and I'm going to apply glue pen to the back of each and center those on my wood grain right over top of the holes that I've die cut. And I'm going to do that on all 3. And here's how that looks. I'm just going to set it aside for a second. I've brought over my white cardstock and I'm going to stamp out all my critters. The stamps in the Whale Done set are very detailed. They have lots of texture and they give a really realistic look to the images. So I've stamped out the turtle in Stampin' Up Pear Pizzazz. I'm stamping out my whale in Balmy Blue. And using So Saffron ink, I'm going to stamp out the little seahorse 3 times. So as you can see, there's a lot of really pretty realistic texture on them, and you could absolutely leave them like this, but I wanted to add just a little bit of color as well. So I'm going to be using the Stampin' Blends markers from Stampin' Up to add a little bit of color to the images. You don't want to go over the colored ink too much because it could smear a little bit. If you wanted to heat set your images some beforehand, you could do that. So I'm taking light So Saffron and adding a little bit of yellow to the turtle, and then using light Old Olive, I'm going to fill in the rest of those sections with the green. So as you can see, you really don't need to add too much color to these. Going back to that same Daffodil Delight, I'm going to add a little bit of color inside the seahorses. I'm going to avoid where their eyes are. And for the whale, I'm going to be using Light Pool Party. And I'm not going to go all the way down. I want to leave a little bit of the white uncolored just to give him a little bit, kind of a blue ombre effect. And I'm not going to color in where his eye or his hole is. And that is really all the coloring that I need to do. So next I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut around all my stamped images, leaving just a little bit of a white border. Here are all my images cut out, and for the sentiment I'm going to take the really small thin stitched rectangle die and cut it from a snip of the same green cardstock that I used for my base. And using chocolate chip ink, I've stamped the sentiment in the center of that die cut piece. Now I'm ready to put my pattern paper behind the openings of my porthole. As you can see, the curves of the sand can be kind of lined up a little bit so that it looks like a continuous scene. Then you can lay your portholes however you would like on the paper. Once I was happy with the placement, I took my pencil and just made a couple of little guidelines around that so I could just trim that off with my paper trimmer. So I've trimmed those papers down. I'm going to turn them over and place a piece of regular Scotch tape just to hold them in place while I'm gluing on the porthole. And next I'm going to take my tape runner and I'm going to run some tape along all 4 of those edges of the pattern paper, and yes, I am taping so that the pattern that I want is facing up. Then I'm going to lay the wood grain over top and press down. And now I'm ready to put my critters in the scene. I've put some adhesive on the back of the turtle. I'm going to lift up the edge of that porthole. I kind of slide the back side of the turtle in underneath there and push that down. I've applied adhesive to the back of the little seahorses. I'm going to place them in my scene as well. And I'm doing the same with my whale, just placing him inside that opening. I flipped that over and applied tape runner, and I'm going to center it on my card base. And to finish off my card, I've put some foam tape on my sentiment. I'm going to place that in the upper left-hand corner of my card. And here's our finished card. I really love the slimline design. I think it gives you so much extra area to work with. And I was really happy with the way this turned out, with the wood planks and the portals looking out on all the cute little sea creatures. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to check out my channel and subscribe. And I hope you have a whale of a day. Bye.